Welcome to the HFG podcast, Unlocking Potential. And thanks for joining us. I'm Jenny Cutter, and today we're talking about emotional intelligence with Ellen Moriarty. Many organizations focus on training the vital technical skills that we all must acquire to be effective at doing our jobs. But few organizations realize the need for the other softer people skills, which can have a tremendous impact on your level of motivation, your degree of self-confidence, your ability to navigate difficult relationships, and your overall health and well-being on the job and at home. At Hometown Financial Group, we understand this important type of training and education. In fact, since 2016, we launched the very first emotional intelligence workshop for our employees organization-wide, and we have kept the topic of emotional intelligence top of mind ever since. Now it's time to welcome executive coach Ellen Moriarty. She's an expert in the topic of emotional intelligence and is here to provide us with some insight into the topic, particularly why it's important in the workplace. Hi, Ellen. Thanks so much for joining us.
Well, first of all, thank you for reaching out and inviting me to speak a bit more about emotional intelligence because it is such a relevant topic for the workplace. Most importantly, it's just a life skill that I think we all benefit from and by having an awareness of it.
Great. Okay, let's start there. So what is emotional intelligence?
I think the easiest way to understand emotional intelligence is that it's really about your ability, you as an individual, your ability to recognize your own emotions. What are you feeling in the moment? What are you sensing in the moment? And a lot of it has to do with just definite feelings, but there's another part of it that has to do with what is your mood at any given time. And as most of us know, our moods change. Our feelings and regard for things, people, ourselves change. So emotional intelligence, if you want the short kind of version of it before you dive too deeply, is an understanding of what you're feeling. And then, and here's I think one of the more important parts, is having an understanding and appreciation for what others are feeling and sensing. So it's twofold. It's self-awareness and awareness of others. And if you really go even further with that, it's also about your ability to kind of size up where you're coming from and then be able to relate to another human being.
So it sounds like this will be pretty important in the workplace.
Yes, absolutely. So if you think about the workplace, yes, there's the work that has to be done. There's the absolute, daily tasks and meetings and whatnot. But within the tasks and within the meetings is this incredible ability for us to understand, how am I feeling? How am I feeling about the meeting? Am I anxious? Am I concerned? Am I elated? Am I excited to share the information that I have? All of that is data in an emotional sphere. It's data that we can then understand and then use. So emotional intelligence in the workplace, I think, is just an absolute vital skill to have. And the good news about it, Jenny, the good news about emotional intelligence is it is, in fact, a skill, which means it can be taught, which also means it can be learned and it can be developed and it can be utilized in many, many different ways. So, just to kind of reiterate, emotional intelligence is the ability to understand self and to understand others. It sounds so simple, and yet it's not simple, but it is something that we really can, should, and hopefully will learn to use better.
Right, there's so much that goes into it.
Oh yes, so much, so much.
So based on my mood and how I'm feeling that day, that could fluctuate how my emotional intelligence impacts my decision making.
That is your emotional intelligence, believe it or not. That it's not like emotional intelligence is good, because it is good and it's a part of us. But yes, depending on your mood, just think about it. If you're, let's take Mondays. For many of us, a Monday is a hard day to do what? To get going, to motivate ourselves, to ingratiate ourselves to brace the world after a wonderful, fun weekend. So if you think about your mood on a Monday, and I am making this, kind of worst case, but I think for a lot of us, Mondays are hard to get going. What choices do you have in your toolkit of emotional leverage? What tools do you have to improve that emotion, to change that outlook, to change that, oh, here we go again? We have all of it. We have every little bit of emotional intelligence that we should need or can need to enhance and change our emotional landscape. Look at the sunshine, look at how fortunate we are, take stock of what you have that is the positive. That will, in a little short amount of time, change how you're viewing yourself and the world. So I don't mean to make it sound so simplistic, but we have all the tools we need in our emotional intelligence toolkit to change mood, to change input, to change output, to change perspective of how we view ourselves and therefore how we view the world. Does that make a little bit of sense?
It does, yes. That's very interesting to break it down that way.
Yeah, so we don't have to stay in necessarily, and I know this is kind of the negative side of it, but there's also a positive side. We don't have to stay in a mood that's less than us being motivated. What excites us? Make a quick checklist of what excites you about being at work. Do you love interacting with customers? Do you love the fact that you get to develop other people? Do you love talking? Maybe it's as simple as having coffee with a friend before your workday starts. Those are all emotions, and they're all possible to be used, leveraged, and harnessed. I think it's the best way to say it.
It's so interesting to think about things like that, just enjoying your social time with coworkers. That is emotional intelligence. Yeah.
Yes, it is. The good, the bad, and the even better.
Yes, exactly. So you mentioned that it's a skill that can be learned. What are some tools that we can use to enhance or improve our emotional intelligence?
That's a great question. That's really where everybody wants to go is, okay, so once I know that I have this at my fingertips, now what do I do? Believe it or not, the very first and most important thing to be aware of is yourself. Have a ability to view yourself openly, honestly, the good and the bad, and say, I'm overall a very kind, friendly, good, smart person. That's a great place to start. Or start with, say, some areas that you need improvement. I need to be better at speaking in public, or I need to be more open to new and challenging ideas in the workplace. So first and foremost is to kind of get a handle on and awareness of who you are. And we're all complex. And we all have good points, and we all have points that need improvement, and we all have things that we don't want to admit necessarily to ourselves. But the more astute person of emotional intelligence has I'm going to call it the guts and the grit to look at self very clinically and to take stock. Once you do that, you get to decide, well, where do I want to improve? So if you can start with the key areas of understanding who you are and then add to, and here's a really important part, take who you are and then decide what is it that you want to manage or improve in a better way. Now, manage and improve in a better way means, let's just say that I am fearful of public speaking. Now, a couple of thoughts and choices that I have is that I could run and hide from it. I could do and I have done that in my past, believe it or not, is you can say, I don't like speaking in public. I know my job is eventually going to require that, but I'll just sit over here and pretend that I don't have a problem with it. The emotionally intelligent person is going to say, I do have a problem with it. I don't like the fact that I may have to public speak. What can I do? Who can I reach out to? What skills can I garner so that speaking in public isn't so very horrible for me? And the more I do it, the better I'm going to get at it. That's taking stock of self. The next area, I think, of emotional intelligence improvement comes in the area of understanding what another might be feeling and thinking and doing. Now, that's pretty hard work. And a lot of people say to me, well, I don't want to be a psychologist. I'm not a shrink. You don't have to be. What you do have to have is kind of an awareness of other people and even an ability to like and want to understand better other people. One of my favorite quotes ever, and it's funny how it fits into my worldview of emotional intelligence, is Abraham Lincoln said to his cabinet members back in the 1800s, he was speaking of someone that he didn't care for, and he said, I don't like that man. And I'm sure his cabinet members were like aghast that wonderful, sweet, kind Abraham Lincoln would say, I don't like that man. To which he followed up with, I need to get to know him better. So I often use that as an example in any of my classes on emotional intelligence. And I say, what does that mean? Well, it means that Abraham Lincoln said, I don't like that guy over there. How often have we said that? I don't like that guy. If you follow that up with, I don't like that guy or that gal or that manager or that coworker with, I need to get to know them better, the chances of you're actually finding out A, why you don't like that person, or B, that maybe you don't dislike them as much as you thought you did, are enhanced by just taking a step back, admitting that you don't like that person. And I know this sounds so basic, but it's so valuable. I don't like that person, followed up with, I'm going to get to know them better. Maybe I'll go out to lunch with them. Maybe I'll find out what is it that I don't like. Or maybe I'll find out that it's nothing that I don't like and I actually just didn't know them very well. So I think that ability, again, to use self as your guideline and then reach out to other people to try to understand what others are all about, because we are all very complex. So that's two ways that I can think of that help us to enhance our emotional intelligence. The other thing that I think I'm very fortunate that I have, which can be both good and bad, is that I observe others. I observe neighbors. I observe how people react to me. I observe, when I'm at my best. I observe when I'm not at my best. And so I use self as the guide. And if there's something that I'm not pleased with, then I think, what is it that I'm not pleased with? Or the contrary to that is, what am I pleased with? What do I like about me? Can I leverage that? Can I use that more? Am I a good listener? Do I observe others? Do I use that information, which is powerful, to help another person? All of that is emotional intelligence. And if you use that in the workplace, in a meeting, on a phone call, with a client, with a customer, I think you're going to really see some great improvement with self and with the relationship you have with another human being or a team. So I think your question was a great one. I mean, you can have an understanding of emotional intelligence, but okay, now what? How do I improve that? And one of the things that I love to say to people, because it's so readily available, is, believe it or not, TV, sitcoms, movies, watch other people. If you think about what movies are, or books, novels, they're an opportunity for us to be a voyeur, as they say, and watch other people. How are they relating? Pull it apart, understand it, and then practice that with your teammate, with your others, with your family, with your neighbors. How are they interacting with you? How are you interacting with them? What can you do to improve an interaction or a relationship? That's what emotional intelligence is really about. Understanding self and utilizing that to make your life, your relationships, your work, your home a better place to be, a happier, more adjusted place to be.
Great. Awesome. One last question I have.
Sure.
In some of your classes, we've been fortunate enough to hear the difference between empathizing with someone and sympathizing with someone. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between that?
Yeah, I think the easiest and best way to identify the difference between sympathy is very, very important. I would never negate the importance of feeling sorry for another human being. That's a great place to start. Oh my gosh, I feel so sorry. My heart is heavy for that person. When you have empathy for that person or that situation, it's actually allowing yourself to feel what they may feel. And I think, Jenny, you'll often hear me talk about how if you watch the news and there's a horrific weather report and homes and lives have been torn up by a tornado. Well, we're fortunate here that we don't have many tornadoes, although we have, but we're fortunate here that we don't experience that. And yet, when you hear about it, read about it, if you can actually imagine what that is like, feeling what that might be like, that feeling of desperation, hopelessness, total destruction, if you can feel that, that's empathy. If you can just watch it and hear about it and go, oh, that's awful, and then move on to something else, that's sympathy. Sympathy is a more fleeting, believe it or not, fleeting emotion. Empathy is in your heart, in your soul. You really do feel it. And with empathy, what often follows from empathy is action, taking action. Yeah. And so sympathy is, oh, I wish that didn't happen. I'm really sorry. Empathy is, oh my gosh, I can feel what those poor individuals, and it's not always negative. Empathy isn't just feeling badly for what someone else has gone through. It's actually celebrating a victory. Somebody gets promoted at work and you go, oh my gosh, they worked so hard. I can feel that for them and with them. So empathy is a vital human emotion that needs to just be aware of, and then you can capitalize on it and make it even more. connecting with other human beings through empathy.
That's so great. The point that you make, that empathy is a positive as well. It's all the way around.
Yeah, and even I'm guilty of this. We think of empathy as that ability to reach out and really feel the misery that someone else has felt, but it's also the positive as well, which is very powerful.
That is definitely, I feel like the impact from that already, thinking about the different promotions and the different, happy announcements other people have had that I felt for them.
Yeah, absolutely. You're excited for them. Yes, absolutely. Yes. Important skill, important life skill. And again, the one thing that I'll want to go back to about just emotional intelligence is the wonderful aspect that it can be taught. Children are being taught this all the time in grade school. They're even being taught in kindergarten. What are the emotions that you're feeling today, little Bobby? What do you feel? I'm mad, I'm sad, I'm excited, I got a new truck, I got a new doll. They're teaching that stuff to children. And so children growing up now have the benefit of having probably been introduced to emotional intelligence far earlier than us, who got it in the workplace or who are getting it through workshops that the bank are promoting, which is just wonderful that we're doing it now.
Yes, absolutely. Is there anything else that you would like to touch on emotional intelligence before we wrap up?
Well, I think we touched upon what it is. I think how important it is at work. All you have to do is realize that you do better work when you're motivated. You do better work when you're feeling positive about yourself. So much of emotional intelligence is the ability and the willingness to improve your own sense of self, which we call confidence. Confidence, as we know, comes and goes. But the more confident we are in the workplace, I think the better work we do. And if you're not, and you're not particularly confident, figure out, a couple of things that you might do. Maybe it's look at a couple of things you did last week that was a better week. Embrace those things and use those things to enhance where you are now.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Ellen, so much for joining us and spending some time talking about emotional intelligence.
Thank you, Jenny, for reaching out.
Thanks for tuning in. Join us on our next episode of our HFG podcast, Unlocking Potential.